and buying time, killing people next in line, lower class and social slime, they don't matter, genocide, sick from water, sick from air, making money, they don't care, Caesar shit, force of air, fuck them back, it's only for they bomb, they shoot, they kill, they massacre, rape, they burn the kids, no one leaves countries, lie to your face, fight, and die, cause God forgive. Selling lies and buying time, killing people next in line, lower class and social slime, they don't matter, genocide, sick from water, sick from air, making money, they don't care, see their shit, force a bear, fuck them back, that's only fair, they bomb, they shoot, they kill, they massacre, rape, they burn the kids, no one leaves countries, lie to your face, fight, and die, cause God forgives, yeah. Coming back around again.
Okay, everyone, welcome to the show. I'm your host, Ron Stevens, and this is Game On here, the first day of May 2016. And I'm very pleased to have Michael Walsh as my guest today, who is a writer for the Renegade Tribune, which I'll get the link in here shortly. Anyways, I want to thank Chris for hooking me and Michael up. Michael's in Spain, and he's an Irishman and a writer, poet, and involved in politics, which is basically the politics that has a very bad name right now, I suppose you could describe it as the politics of the people, by the people, for their nation, for the betterment of their nation and the nation's people, which is basically kind of opposite to multiculturalism. And multiculturalism is a tool of genocide, as far as I'm concerned. Multinationalism or multiculturalism is designed to destroy the society of any given nation, and that is all part of the global agenda to destroy the nation states. So because Michael's from Spain, and hopefully we can get into what's going on with the European Union and how it has basically put a noose around the nations of Europe, and has caused considerable damage through, and all the EU really is mass regionalism. And while you still have a vote in your country, you basically have an overlord called the European Union. And we here in the West have the same thing breathing down our throat. And most of it's already been implemented behind our backs, and not the media, not the politicians, not the teachers, not the universities, have given the proper information to the people so they can make a decision on the direction of their own countries. So, Michael, just really quickly, there's some good stuff in here, and I'm really, really looking forward to this today because I really wanted to talk to somebody from the other side of the pond, if you will. Anyways, I'll just do this quickly, and then we'll get Michael on. Michael's father is Irish, Patrick, and was a veteran of 4 frontline conflicts by the time he was 40 years of age. Patrick was a battlefield associate of legendary American novelist Ernest Hemingway. Some may like Ernest and some may not, but that's neither here nor there. and a longtime friend of Ireland's revered playwright Sean O'Casey, Michael's mother Kathleen, a friend of Dolores Iburia, and Michael is an Irish and British national and has been super active in the struggle for race conservation since 1968. So he's had a long run at this. Back then he was an associate of Colin Jordan and led the British movement's election campaigns in Birmingham and Liverpool. Michael took over the British movement when Jordan resigned, from which point the British movement renamed the British National Socialist Movement, because the most successful pro-right party in the UK since the 1930s. So Michael's had a very active life, to say the least. And I'm looking forward to his insights as back far as he can go. I know that he has written, and I haven't read this, I'm sure lots of people have read it, but I have mainly dealt with what's been going on in the West here, not so much, I mean the West, I'm talking about North America, not so much Europe, although I've done a lot of background on Europe to find out what's going on over here. Michael has authored 24 book titles and ghosted many more. His 10 truth books on the Reich are the most popular of Mike Walsh's Library of European Thought. He's a regular broadcaster. He's in the past debated on British national television, BBC and local radio stations. Mike Walsh's masterpiece has undoubtedly been his 4 volumes Witness to History set of books. He says, I wanted just one title that would truthfully chronicle the Reich from 1914 to 1950. My purpose was to create one title that would effectively torpedo the victor's propaganda that has defamed National Socialism, protected Bolshevism, and censored information relating to Wall Street's partnership with Bolshevik Russia. And that's important. That's really important. So I'm going to bring Michael on now. And Michael is a writer, a regular contributor to the Renegade Tribune, and is a prolific writer. And so anyways, I'm going to bring Michael on now, and we'll get on with the show. Michael, are you there?
Yeah, Ron, it's a pleasure and a privilege to be talking with you and Canada live. And, it's a long way, but we're immediate. We're together for an hour or so. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and me too, because I'm almost running blind here. I have lots of questions, and I hope the people listening have lots of questions later. Maybe we can open the phone lines, which would be fun. But what I found out this morning right off the bat was that Spain's a lot bigger population than I thought. I thought that Spain was like Portugal and Greece, which are running around 10 million, but actually what I see is the population, if it's correct, is about 48 million people. Does that sound right to you?
That's absolutely right, and it is the biggest country in Europe. So it's also the highest country in Europe and the second highest capital in Europe. So you got a pretty big country here, and you've got several weather climates. So when we're basking in the sun down at the Mediterranean, up the north, it can be very much like your part of the world, well, Canada anyway, and villages cut off with the snow. So a very high country, a dramatic country, and quite a past.
So Spain is okay. Just because I'm just looking at a map, and I didn't have time to go and make a comparison, but take Britain. The size of Britain to the size of Spain, are they comparable, or is Spain a lot bigger?
Not really. Spain is the size of 5 Englands.
Oh, really? Okay,
yeah,
okay, that's
Britain.
perfect. That's perfect.
Let's stick to England, but England is the biggest country, obviously, of the British Isles. But
Right.
Spain is 5 times the size of England.
Okay, so that gives me a good perspective of the size of Spain, because England basically fits into Ontario, which is my province here, which is one province in Canada. So you can put England into Spain 5 times, and
Yep.
we can put England into Ontario. I think it's a little over 4 times. So our province is
Yes, it's a bit.
basically somewhere in the same vicinity size-wise as Spain. Um,
Yeah, sometimes I feel a bit isolated here, because it's a bit like being an American who lives in Yukon.
yeah, 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 yeah,
And you've
yeah,
got a
exactly.
long way to
E-
go
e-
to your own country. I'm a
Exactly.
long way away from Northern Europe, which is my country, my homeland, my heartland.
Yeah. Like Ontario has a population of a little less, I think, than 15 million people.
Okay.
And it's over 4 times. You can drop four or five Englands in here without a whole lot of trouble. Uh, and so we're very underpopulated. And Ontario is the most populous province in the whole country. So we have this humongous country, second largest landmass country on the planet, with only 34 million people in it, less than the population of the state of California. And here we have people, growing numbers of people here who are homeless, who go to food banks. It's absolutely ridiculous, the richness of this nation, that we have people that are hard done by here, and the numbers are growing daily. So Spain, what I find so interesting about Europe really is the length of time it's been there. America and Canada are very young nations, other than the native people that populated before we came and genocided the poor buggers. And it wasn't us that genocided. It wasn't the settlers that did the genocide. It was the company, basically, that did that. So you have a much richer history than we do. You've been through a lot of wars in that neck of the woods, and you've seen the ebb and flow of politics and different ways that countries run, sometimes successfully, sometimes not so successfully. But as far as the European Union goes now, which contains Britain as well, do you look at the EU as positive or negative?
It's a negative. It was a CIA-formed unity that was foisted upon the European people without any input from the people. So I think it was Mikhail Gorbachev, the last General Secretary of the Soviet Union, who said, "Why are you trying to copy the Soviet Union?" And he was referring to the European Union, and he was absolutely correct. There's very, very little difference. Only an academic could tell it apart from the Soviet Union in government and absolutely everything. It has 2 presidents, but if I was to go out of my doors now and talk to 100 Spaniards and say, who is the name of your president of the European Union, probably it's highly unlikely that they would be able to tell me. And it's Junkers. He's from Liechtenstein. He's a financier, and he's got a very dodgy history. I can't even remember the other one, but does it matter? Because these people are not elected. They elect themselves. There are also 22 commissioners, which I call commissars. And they effectively run the European Union, and they're supposed to take the advice of the members of the European Parliament, which are parliamentarians, legislators, but of course these are only theatre. Nobody takes any notice of them. So very much like the old Soviet Union, the European Union, which is the same by comparison, is run by unelected suits.
Yeah, it's like I have a picture on my blog of a square structured chair with some very expensive looking suit and a hat with no face, which is the faceless bureaucrat. And the gentleman, and I can't remember his name right now, and the gentleman who was the finance minister in Greece said basically, Yanis Varoufakis or whatever. He said basically the exact same thing you did. Now, he was a finance minister, and he brought up that same name you did. that nobody knows, wasn't elected. And he said, we are the vermin, really, of the people that are actually running the European Union. They have no use for us whatsoever. The people in our countries vote for us, but we get called into these meetings, and we are just there to be told what we're going to do, and to nod our heads yes and stamp it. So you're being run basically, without any kind of political input whatsoever. It's all basically just a theater.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what we're seeing that's what we're seeing here now. I mean, we've been seeing it forever. A lot of people haven't been able to see it. I knew something was desperately wrong with this place in the 70s when I was quite young. Something didn't add up at all. And but it's come to the point where we are basically in the same position as the EU.
Very similar. It's all theatre, and I always think of. I work a lot in analogies, Ron, and I always think of the parliaments, wherever they are, Canada, the United States, Britain, as a Punch and Judy show, and we're just the kids who are standing and sitting in front of the show, and we're watching Punch knock hell out of Judy and Judy knock hell out of Punch, and we're all cheering one or the other. But what we don't see is the guy behind the curtain who's pulling the strings. So this is pure theatre for us, and we think, because we're children, we're juveniles, we actually innocently think that our cheering Punch on or Judy on is making a difference, and it's not going to make a difference. The story is going to end up exactly. It's theatre.
So, how I'm a firm believer that propaganda has a shelf life of so long, just like any other product. And my thought process is that the propaganda has been getting so outrageous, and that the basic population is starting to seriously question the theater they've been watching and thinking they're being involved in. And I'm just wondering, because Europe is, the European Union is way ahead. I mean, it's just a huge regionalization game. Is way ahead of us here on this side. And I'm just wondering, are the people over there starting to come to grips with the propaganda that they've been suckered by?
Oh, yeah, very much so. And you're really, for a large part, dependent, if I may say so, on free thinkers like me, because your media is absolutely controlled, with the exception of brave, pioneering broadcasting independent units like your own. But in 9 countries, don't ask me to name them all, but certainly the likes of Germany, Austria, Denmark, the Netherlands, Belgium, what is termed, and I don't like the term, right-wing, I prefer the term of racial nationalists. They are not only on the rise, but we're not talking here on about them inching up. We're talking about them taking over. For the very first time, we have a big, big bloc in the European Union Parliament, which is a coalition of what you and I might describe as right-wing interests. Now, when I say right-wing, we're not talking American conservative. We're talking much more further to the right than that. Now, last weekend, the Freedom Party of Austria won nearly 36% of the vote. Now, the Freedom Party of Austria, now these people who vote and associate themselves with that particular party, they are just as likely, probably more likely, to vote for the National Socialist German Workers' Party of Adolf Hitler. That is how nationalist they are. So it has been a cause of seismic shock in Europe that a party like the Austrian Freedom Party could attract 36% of the vote. There is nowhere in Europe that has attracted that level of vote since the 1930s, so that's how powerful it is. But this is Austria. Austria is a small country. It's one of 28 in the European Union, but there's another 9 that are going the other way. For the first time in history, we have people in all of the Scandinavian countries, Denmark, Sweden and Norway, who are far right. We're talking fascist, we're talking National Socialist. And it's moving that way very, very quickly in the Netherlands, in Belgium, Germany, France. In France, you've got the Front National. In Germany, you've got the National Party Democratic. These people are all the kind of people who do the Sieg Heil. So things are swinging radically, and the press, your press, our press, are keeping quiet about it.
Oh, our press is so quiet about everything; it's ridiculous. I mean, we don't have a press here.
You don't?
No, we don't. We have no press here at all. I mean, a classic example is Morris Strong, who was the mouthpiece for the environmental movement. He started UNEP. He's involved with China. I mean, the guy is a Rockefeller globalist player from the get-go. And when he died, supposedly, just before the Paris conference, which prompted the people in the Paris conference to say, "Oh, we have to get this signed because all the hard work Morris Strong did." But here in Canada, you would think a guy that was this influential would get a state funeral or something. There was basically no mention anywhere in any of the press that this guy died or existed or anything else. I mean, it's one of these background players like the guy you mentioned, the invisible man pulling the puppet strings at the EU. Right? There's people know nothing in this country. It's disgusting. The only thing that they know is
they're not there to report the news. They're there to create the news and to mould public opinion the way they want it to be. So really, one may as well switch the television off, put the newspaper away, and go and have a look at Grimm's fairy tales. It's probably nearer the truth.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think we should have a national Barrier TV in the backyard day here. Would be a good start. The people here, and I remember telling people way back in the 70s, Michael, that, and I took a lot of flack for it. People didn't want to hear it. I said, we do not live in anything you could call a democracy, not knowing what that even was way back then. But the fact is that we live in a benevolent dictatorship here. That once a party gets a majority government, we have no checks and balances here. They can do basically whatever they want. Yep. And as long as they put on the face of benevolence, no one is going to say anything. They will love their government. And if one tries to push a little harder, well, you throw them out and get benevolence back, right? That's the way it works. I said, but that is just to soften the minds and the spines of the people. When they decide to make a move, whatever move they plan on making, and I didn't know anything about world government back there, but when they decide that they're not going to any longer be benevolent, the people have been softened so much that they don't know how to react. And that's what I feel is going on here now.
Yeah, as George Bernard Shaw said 80 years ago, he said the British people every 5 years get democracy. They go down to the ballot box and they vote it away, by which he was meaning you're voting in a rotating dictatorship.
Exactly.
So as soon as you place your vote, you've got a dictatorship for the next 5 years. And although I hate the guy, Winston Churchill, there is something that he said, which is very, very close to my thinking, is the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with your average voter.
Exactly. Yeah, I have no use for Mr. Churchill, but even those people come up with some good quotes now and again,
knowing him, he probably stole it from somewhere, because a lot of the quotes that are attributed to him, like in the morning, I will be sober, but these were old music hall jokes, and, it was his propaganda department that attributed all of these clever, witty comments to Winston Churchill, but he was totally undeserving. He wasn't a particular wit. fighting on the beaches, that was stolen from the Italian revolutionary Garibaldi. He was always stealing speeches, but, the real truth about Churchill is, well, it is there. If anybody, goes on the search engines and looks up Winston Churchill, paedophilia and that sort of thing, they will find out really what a vile, monstrous man that was.
Well, most of the people that rise to the top are not what you would call moral men and women.
They're controlled. They're controlled, they're compromised. They're compromised either by sex or by finance or some kind of skullduggery, but there is nobody that is not controlled. We've all got skeletons in the cupboards, me included. Mine are mild by comparison, and if they were to be put out on the desk, I'm just not going to do little more than blush. But these people in power, what they've got hiding in the closet is beyond belief, and a lot of it, I think if there ever is a people's revolution, and these are thrown out, and we are getting rid of the media, and we really are investigating these people who are running us today, the people will be shocked, they will be horrified, they'll have to go on a life support machine when they see the background to some of the politicians that they hold in high regard, just as people held in high regard the likes of Winston Churchill and Roosevelt. And if they knew their real backgrounds, they would be absolutely horrified, and their connections, because you're known by the people you keep.
Yeah, and the media has done its job well. Excuse me. I mean, when Rockefeller said he wanted to thank the media for their promise of staying quiet, basically, for the last 40 years, otherwise we could have never put our plan into place, right? But how is it that where are the strong, morally fit men and women? They have to be out there somewhere.
They are, but they're as rare as hen's teeth. Russia has got one in Putin. It doesn't matter whether you like him or you don't like him. That's not the point. He's powerful. He's a strong leader. He came from absolutely nothing. Very humble background, very ordinary, and one way or another, he's been in there a long time, and he has completely changed the world. As I say, whether you like him or if you don't like him, that is immaterial, and he is a one-off. And what we do need is that kind of leader. We need somebody to come out of the woodwork and galvanize the masses. And as you say quite rightly, where are these guys, Ron? We need a Mussolini, we need a Hitler, we need a Cromwell, somebody who will come out and grab this sleeping nation, this sleeping continent, and give it a damn good shaking. You've got it in Hungary. You've got Viktor Orbán. He is the Prime Minister of Hungary. Now, Hungary, like Spain, is a very, very big country. It's a very powerful country. And it's very, very right-wing, by which, now, when I say right-wing, let's call a spade, it's fascist. The Jobbik Party, they don't make any bones about it. All of their flags, their symbols, their regalia are pure National Socialist. They are one of the biggest parties in the Hungarian parliament. And I'm surprised at this in some respects, because Viktor Orbán's own political party, which is in power in Hungary, is as right-wing. He is, that party is so right-wing that Donald Trump would appear to be a liberal lefty.
Really?
No kidding. And he's running Europe, and he has told Brussels and Berlin, you do it your way, I will do it mine. You mentioned the European Union before. I was getting my hair cut last weekend, and the barber who values my advice, he says, how long would you think? Do you really think that the European Union will collapse, Mike? And I said, well, it is collapsing. Never mind will it collapse, it is collapsing. Only today in the newspapers, the Schengen area, this means that I live in Spain. Try to think of Europe if you can, if you're familiar with it at all. Up until a few months ago, I could get into my car with my wife and we could drive, no problems at all, right through Spain, cross the border into France, cross the border into Germany, into Poland, into Lithuania, into Latvia, Estonia and Finland without once having our papers checked. You can't now. The border controls are back up again. So the Schengen area is history. So is NATO. That's history because nobody's contributing to it in Europe. And nobody wants it in Europe. It's a case of the mentality here is Americans go home. And one country after another is doing its own thing and giving the finger to Brussels. So the whole thing is collapsing. It's again, I work in analogies. It's like a man, and he thinks, and theoretically, he is the head of the household. But his wife hates him. She's having an affair. He's got 5 teenage children who don't take a blind bit of notice of him. He's not running things, but figuratively, he is the head of the household. And this is what Brussels is doing. It's anarchy here, and it's all collapsing fast. It's going the same way as the Soviet bloc.
Well, see, that gives me pause for hope because. If I know I watch certain things from the European Union every now and again, and it seems to me like it's collapsing. The people that set it up, the people that are running it, haven't got to the point of acceptance of that idea yet. They're still trying to pull strings and wiggle and continue to deceive the people. But like I said, I think that propaganda position is pretty well weakened to the point now where people just look at it and laugh at it. And the pressure from the people in their own nations on their politico, if you will, I feel is getting to the point where those leaders of any particular country have to back off now. Because the people would be, I think, looking at their, so-called national leaders more like treasonous dogs for having them hooked up with the EU. So this is what I'm kind of hoping happens here is that, I always tell people that, if you want to know what's going to be going on here in 6 months to 2 years, just go look at Europe. The just like syndrome, eh, Michael?
Yeah, it's a case as to which goes first, the United States or Europe.
It's an amazing sales tool. We got sold, Denmark, which is a population of 5 million people, has windmills. Well, that's nice. We have more water resources, coal resources, oil resources per capita than anywhere else on the planet. Well, we give a damn what Denmark's up to, right? They sold us the Spanish wind farm deal here, right? Look at Spain. Look at how successful they are with wind there, right? And so you have the save the earth propaganda, and then look what they're doing. We need to be just like them, right, or do just like what they're doing. And it seems to get into people's heads that, well, why aren't we doing things like these other people? Well, why don't you ask yourself why these other countries are doing what they're doing, right? If you started there, you might find out it's not such a good idea.
Yeah, I think also, as many of our legislators, yours, ours, they're all bought out. And I've always said the very first thing that I would do come the revolution is I would go through all of their bank accounts. People scratch their heads in Britain, for instance, and they say, well, we're broke. We ain't got any money. We're up to our necks in debt. Why on earth are we spending 200 million or whatever the case may be in, aid to India, which is much more prosperous than Britain is? The reason is this money is going to factories in India and elsewhere throughout the world on the promise that they will spend the money on British factories. So it's money laundering on a massive scale. And, of course, the factories that they're putting the business into, it is the politicians who have got the shares in these factories.
Bingo.
So every time aid goes to India or Uganda or Canada, or somebody said, why is Britain giving 200 million every year to Canada? Canada's got enough money of their own. And the reason is there is a stitch-up is that money will be redirected into British factories and places like that, services, in which the politicians who voted for the aid have got massive shares. So it's money laundering on a massive scale.
Yeah, you hit it. You hit it right on the head there, because that's what I see going on here. We have, like Margaret Thatcher did a long time ago, selling off the assets because private businesses more efficient, and our prices will be lowered because of their efficiencies and so on and so forth. And when you look at it, who's benefiting from all of these privatizations, it's normally you can track your politicians to the ones that are benefiting, or friends of, or businesses of friends of, right? And so the people who actually built, because government builds nothing. Only the hands of the people can build anything, and those people use their sweat and their labor to build the infrastructure of their nations, to have politicians sell off your roads and your rivers and your factories and your telecommunication systems and so on and so forth, to benefit those who did not have an ounce of labor involved in the building of it. And it's just straight out theft of the labor of the people, and being distributed to the
situation
friends.
there, Ron, is the situation there is probably very similar. I certainly know it is in Congress and the Senate. Is that in Parliament in Britain, 77% of the members of Parliament, who most from an ordinary background, are millionaires, but only 0.07% of ordinary British people are millionaires. So you don't have to be an accountant. It's not rocket science. How come that as soon as they go into Parliament, they become millionaires? Now, their salary is not very high at all, so they must be getting the money from somewhere, and of course they're not recording it all. If you're running a business, no matter how modest, in your high street, you have got to submit all of your paperwork to the government, to the tax authority, so they know to the cent what you are making and what you're spending on your investment, absolutely everything. But the parliamentarians in your country and our country, they are totally separated from this type of accountability. So, of course, they become millionaires very, very quickly. It's into the system. It's I would say that it was institutionalized corruption. The difference with Britain is that they have made corruption legal. So they say they don't have any corruption. Well, of course you won't. If you make bank robbery legal, then, of course, it's not illegal anymore, is it?
So you don't have any bank robbery.
That's right. You don't have any bank robbers, no. But I think it was an American CIA or something like that. The best way to rob a bank is to own one, and he was absolutely right.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've ever heard of Yuri Brezhnev or not. A gentleman by the name of Yuri Brezhnev.
Doesn't ring a bell, but
he came to Canada in the 70s. And he was supposedly a KGB agent,
sure.
Who was going around helping to take over countries through basically, the mental game, right? Getting people to go into a nation and get them to accept things that they would not normally accept, or normalize things, right? And one of the important things he said, I think, is whatever you do, do not ever, and you kind of touched on it briefly earlier on, is don't ever let gays, lesbians, or whatever they're called, all the different factions now, ever get into positions of power. And I don't know how it is in Europe, but here our premier of the province is gay, our health minister, finance minister, or not health, but he was our health minister and Ministry of Energy, which is sold off, and our health is sold off. Our Minister of Environment and Climate Change is also gay, and now we have transgendered washrooms coming in. I mean, what is the percentage of population that is transgendered? Extremely small. Probably the same percentage of average Brits who are millionaires. Extremely small percentage of the population, but the population must bend down to the desires, so to speak, of these very, very tiny factions of our society. And it's I think that's going a long ways, though, because people are seeing how ridiculous this is now, and are starting to question, where did this come from?
It's institutionalized.
Yeah.
It's institutionalized. I remember it was a beautiful cartoon. It was an American, as many of them are, and it shows a little boy, probably about 9 or 10, and he's saying to his father, "Father, I can't make up my mind whether to go into organized crime or politics." He said, "Well, pick politics." He says, "Because you don't go to jail for it. It's the same thing."
Well, it is organized crime.
Of course it is, and this sums it up perfectly for me.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know why people are having such a, people are starting to get it, but they still are hanging on to this idea that we have responsible government.
Rubbish.
Well, not really. No, there's no such thing as responsible government. This is, all governments are corporations, and you are a corporate entity, and you are the surety for their debt. And you're on the hook for it, right?
Yep, you bet. That sums it up. It's a corporate entity.
Well, if people would understand what the term human resource means, if you understand the word resource, it could be a tree, a rock, a fish, whatever. That's a resource, and you are a human, which is a transition from man. So you're really not a man anymore. You're just an animal, and you're a resource of the company, and they do as they wish with that resource.
Yeah, you're a nut and bolt. That's all.
Yeah, and
helping to hold things together.
Yeah, and that should really irritate people. If they could just wrap their mind around that simple thing, then I think they would just stand up and say, "Okay, we get it. We quit." Move aside, I worry about, I don't want to see violence. I mean, you look through, the other wars that were all constructed wars, and every war that we've had since the last big war has been a constructed war. And I don't think, what I see is and I don't know if that's like in Europe, but I see it over here, especially in America, where they're trying to incite people to start shooting. And I keep trying to explain to people that's the last thing you want to do, because that's what they want you to do. So you don't want to start shooting. What we need to basically do is understand the corruption, and that we are enslaved through that corruption, and to simply say, we're done with your corruption, and we're going to simply jail you. Because you've broken every law in the books. Absolutely. You have harmed people, and it is against the law to cause harm. And therefore, we have no choice but to bring you to trial. You didn't murder us. Well, you did in one way. You're destroying our nations, and that's against the law. And we need to reconstruct what government actually is. It's supposed to be the servant of the people. The people should never be afraid of their servant. You don't bow to your servant. If you have an employee, Michael, you don't bow to the wishes of your employee.
No.
No. So why are the people bowing to the wishes of those who have enslaved them? It makes no sense.
They don't question it. They're happy with their illusions. They don't want their illusions destroyed, and this is what we're doing. But we're doing it very, very well, because apparently 77%, I know that the statistics are flexible, but apparently 77% of the people no longer rely on mainstream media anymore for their information. They're drawing it, they're vacuuming it up from independent broadcasters like yourself, the what we call alternative media. So things are moving very, very quickly. The mainstream media has lost the enormous power, the omnipotence that it once had. It's all evaporated, and this is a great worry to them.
Yeah, I don't. I heard a thing way long, quite a few years ago, that Rockefeller wanted the internet either highly, controlled or shut down, basically, because the one thing about the globalists, or whatever you want to call them, is they write everything down. It's amazing.
Sure.
Some kind of a code that they have to write it down, so that they can say, well, we told you because it's written down. If you didn't know about it, it's hardly our problem. We wrote it all down. And you know, the internet is a marvelous research tool. I remember researching in big libraries, looking through, you know, reference books, which can take a long time, and you know, it's very difficult. So the internet is an amazing set of tools if a person uses it properly. And so now when the researchers went to work and started looking through the documents, and I'm sure you've been through, I mean, I've read tens of thousands of pages of things, you know, they're going, oh, they're onto us, right? So we need to highly restrict this thing or shut it down, according to Rockefeller. And his boys said, you know, Rocky, we can't shut it down, because this is the backbone of what you're trying to build.
Yep.
Right? Which is total enslavement. And we can't shut it down. So at that point, you know, when they first came out with all the truther movements and that, I used to get a lot of flack, right? Because I would out so many of them. You would get them all running with one story. And unfortunately, people don't check out what the story is, or what the background is, or who the players are that are putting the information forward. And I used to get an awful lot of flack from people, you know. But it goes back to, and if everybody could just do what my grade 6 or 7 teacher told us, or at least I heard it, was that you believe nothing, absolutely nothing that you read, see, or hear, until you personally, take the time to verify the information. Because if you fail to do so, you open your mind to accepting all manner of propaganda and outright lies as truth. Yep. So when the truther movement kicked up, I had a real problem with it. This information, it was like, okay, Rocky, we can't shut it down, but we can flood it. So the people leaving the mainstream media looking for information, when they see something or hear something that resonates with what they're thinking at the time, they don't bother to check out who's behind it. And they just accept it blindly, like they used to accept blindly what they were told in the mainstream media. Thankfully, over the last 10 years or so, it's really started to shake itself out. You know, so you know, the you
can't control it as absolutely. If you go on,
you don't want to control it absolutely.
No.
I mean, you don't want that ever to happen. I mean, you don't want control in media of any kind, but it's up to the people who are dealing with the media. But this idea that, oh, my friend told me that the mainstream media is all full of crap, and I have to go online media. Well, you know, the boys ain't stupid. They know you're moving from one to the other, right? So they grab you over there. And people say, well, I listen to online radio, therefore I'm intelligent. Not necessarily. I'm well informed. Not necessarily. Okay? You have to take the time to do the backgrounds.
Yeah, you've got a question. It's not always possible, and it's a belief. But I was just going to say, the Daily Mail, and you've got your own media over there. You know, they have. It's a very important part of any newspaper. The most read part of the newspaper is readers' letters. This is the way it has always been, and of course they have this facility, this service, online newspapers. So the Daily Mail is an example. You know, whenever the news story appears, then they have anything up to 1,000 readers response to it. But it's the way they control it now. This is why they can't control the internet. I can debate the Holocaust on the internet. I can't debate it in the Daily Mail because I will just get blocked.
Right.
So the thing is if I go on to alternative media, I get all sides of the story, which is democracy. But if I go on to the Daily Mail or the Washington Post or whatever, then I don't, because only those people who believe in the narrative of the people who are running them are allowed to have their views published. Anybody who separates themselves from that just isn't published at all. So it gives a distorted view. And it's rather amusing, the Daily Mail that I quote, because most people don't come on there to get the news from any particular news story. What they come on there for is to have a good laugh at the newspaper's expense, at the mediocrity or the propaganda value of the story. For instance, Putin, for instance, the Daily Mail hate Vladimir Putin with, it's like showing a cross to Dracula. And they absolutely hate him. But a lot of the readers actually respect and admire Putin. So they come in and then they start teasing the Daily Mail for being so transparently far removed from any objectivity at all. So we've got that power of the internet, of the keyboard in front of you and me.
Yeah, I mean, the big difference between the internet and media in general is the media is something you can interact with online, whereas all media that's coming from the media houses, whether it be TV, radio, or newspapers, or magazines, is a constructed editorial process that you're not involved in, and you can't really debate it because it's just fed out to you. And you can't, you could try, I suppose, writing a letter to the editor, but it's like you said, they have their screening processes.
Sure.
So it's a very closed system that they control, which was the whole point way back when they told them to go get, the most important newspapers, and once we control them, then we control the media and we control the news that people get. So we can talk them into a war. And so on and so forth, or we can take any politician or anybody and make them a star or trash them. We have that power.
Which they do.
Yeah, and, so the internet on that sense has been an amazing invention. I don't think enough people yet are, it takes time to do research in that, right? I mean, I have to also look at the average man or woman who are going to work at probably a job they're not that happy with, and just trying to make a paycheck so they can put food on the table and keep a roof over the head of their family. They do not have the time that we've afforded ourselves to be the researchers that we are, and they still I hope somebody proves me wrong, but from my analysis, the average man or woman who comes home after work and got kids that are having problems at school, or someone's ill, or whatever the problem is, just multiple problems. They come home, they eat whatever, and they plunk themselves down in front of the TV because they're dead dog tired. Now, they may not watch the news, right? They may be turned right off by the news, but at the same time, I don't believe that they have brought themselves to a position yet where they realize that everything that comes over that tube has a message attached to it. It doesn't matter if it's a comedy or a history show or whatever it is. The message of the day, or the message of those who wish to control everybody else, those messages are implanted in there.
Yeah, people don't care, Ron, because I was married, and Suzanne was a very intelligent woman, a very intelligent woman, and I couldn't understand why she was watching the soaps, which are pretty juvenile, let's face it. It really wasn't her intellect. And I said, well, why do you watch them? And she says, because I switch off. She says, I'm not interested in reality. She said, I get enough of reality. I want to get away from reality. And people like you and I are inquiring, and most people aren't. They are, they're hamsters on a wheel. And all they want to do, and you question what you see on television, they don't question what's on television. And it's no point in you and me saying to them that the news is 90% fable, simply because they're quite happy. They watch Coronation Street, they watch Emmerdale Farm, they watch all kinds of stuff. They're not interested in whether it's true or not. They just want to be entertained.
Okay, and I agree with you 100% on that. Now, then I suppose that would lead one to the question. We know that not everybody's going to wake up. We know that's not a possibility. All we have to do is look at history. What I was explaining to the American people many years ago, and I still do from time to time, is that what America does, it doesn't require an election. What America requires is a reverse coup. Okay, your nation was stolen from you.
Sure.
Okay, now that's theft. Now, if somebody comes over and steals your lawnmower, and you're walking down the street and you see your lawnmower, and you don't know it's lawnmower because you put your name on the damn thing.
Yes.
Okay, you're not going to think twice about walking up there and going, "You stole my friggin' lawnmower, give it back."
Yes.
Okay, and it's the same thing. That's why I say we don't need a lot of violence in that. We just need to come to the conclusion that it's not a revolution, so to speak. We're just attempting to take back what belonged to us.
Yeah, your comment may amuse me because I don't know if you're old enough to remember the movie Roots. It
Yes,
was a
yes.
docudrama. That's
Yeah.
right. Most people will know because it's been replayed so many times. And the Ku Klux Klan joke was, that they're going to redistribute Roots, the movie, but they're going to run it backwards so it has a happy ending. And what you say about the Tea Party, is let's run America backwards so it has a happy ending and ends up in Boston.
Yeah, yeah. But so we know that through revolutions, through government overthrows, and all this kind of stuff, we know from history is that the majority of the people, the vast majority of the people, are not involved in a fighting war.
No.
They may be involved in it, by supplying, tools and guns and food or whatever, but they're involved in it only because it's what's going on at the time, and they're told to do this. But everything I look at in history, the percentage of the people that actually make the change is rather small compared to the general population. And the general population seems to do, when there's the change, just goes with the flow. They just seem to adapt.
Oh, yeah. Do you really want it any other way? I think it was Lenin, I forget the exact numbers, but it was something along the lines of, if in 1917 only two dozen people had known what we were about to do, we would never have succeeded.
Right.
And Solzhenitsyn said exactly the same. He said, when the police came round at dawn and kicked in the doors, if instead of cowering in their bedrooms, people just came out and overturned those bans and crucified the NKVD, then Bolshevism would have been destroyed. He said, but we're not. It's a tail wagging the dog. This is what's happening in the United States, in Canada, in the European Union. The tail is wagging the dog, and it's about time we woke up and realised our power. And this is why I take very good lessons from the Eastern Europeans. They were faced with their own undemocratic regimes in the Soviet bloc, and in the end, it was not only being pushed out by circumstances, they were pushed out by people power, and we have to do it. There was very little loss of life. I know that it's a tragedy for those who, during that People's Revolution, people did lose their lives in Poland, in the Baltic states, right the way through Hungary, Czechoslovakia. People did lose their lives, but it was, for the large part, a peaceful revolution, and they brought these dictators down. And we must do the same in the European Union and the United States.
That's what I keep telling people, I hear people talk about ants and grasshoppers and stuff. Well, I'm not an ant or a grasshopper, but I guess the idea is okay. But basically, all we need to do is just simply stand up and say no, and mean it. That's about it. It sickens me that in 2016 I still see people signing petitions to governments and getting out with their protest signs. All you're doing is telling your enslavers that you got no spine. When we have these million-man marches up to Washington, why are you stopping at the front gate?
Exactly. It's music to my ears to hear. We had marches in London, over 1 million people. Now, this was non-political. I think it was about animal rights or something like that. So it was non-political as you and I would think of political. Over 1 million people, and it didn't change a thing. Now, you think of the enormous expense. Those people had come from all parts of Britain, long distances. They paid a fortune in travel fees and hotels and all the rest of it. They may as well have sent a postcard. It would have just gone straight in the bin. And as you're absolutely right, Ron, when you say, why are you stopping at the gates? They didn't stop at the gates in Romania, and Ceausescu was overthrown. I think it was December the 8th, whatever the year was. And it was the most beautiful sight. You can still see it on YouTube. And Ceausescu and his Soviet-backed entourage were on the balconies of the government house, and they were trying to placate the miners. As far as the eye could see, probably 2 or 3 football stadiums, there were thousands of miners who hadn't been paid for a while. And they had the power of the Soviet Union. The government had the power of the Soviet Union and the tanks and everything else. And so the population there was pretty much more cowed than we are. And at one stage, and I've never forgotten this, Ron, at one stage, one coal miner hit the air with his fist and he said, out. He shouted in Romanian, out. And there was a shocked, horrified silence. And then a dozen, 2 dozen, 100, 200, 500, 5,000 miners were shouting, out, out. And then the cameras home in on the faces of the political leaders, all there. They were a few minutes earlier. They had been full of themselves. Now their faces looked like they'd been dipped in bleach. And the shock and the horror. And from there on, it was curtains for them. Within 8 days, they tried to do a runner. They tried to get to the Soviet border, but the government didn't do it. And within a few days, I think it was about 10 days, Ceausescu, his wife and his son and a few others were just put up against the wall and they were sprayed. Now, I'm not suggesting that we do this in Ottawa or Washington or something like that, but it just shows you that that was one miner who stood up and said, out, out. And the cry was taken up. And just as you say, Ron, they didn't stop at the gates. They kept on going. The police were ordered to fire on the crowd. 1 or 2 of them did. I think about 5 of the people in the crowd fell. But the police, for the large part, refused to fire. And the rest is history. Romania is now a much more liberated country than it ever was before.
Yeah, and that is all it takes. It really truly is. Those that people fear, these powerful rulers and that, are very weak, slimy, weaselly. They're like the fox and the weasel got into the hen house and is taking control of the hen house, and the roosters need to get their gonads put back where they belong, and go in and take back the house and guard the house. We have I've said this before, and I don't mean to bore the listeners with it, but I did call into Alex Jones once a very long time ago. And, I said, you've been on air for 14 years or something at the time. And he goes, yeah. And I said, but I listened to you a little bit. I don't hear any solutions coming from you. Why is that? And, he says, well, what do you got? I said, well, just go and do the reverse coup, take it back. You're yammering on 1776 or whatever it is all the time. What's that supposed to mean, right?
Yeah.
Just go get it done. And, it was amazing because he said, well, how do you plan on doing that? And I said, well, if you look at history, you guys came up to the east coast of Canada and burned down one of the Parliament buildings, and what did we do? We just, and it's a lot harder then, you had to walk, take a horse, whatever, and what did we do? Did we say, oh, well, they feared us, and now what? Well, we just went down there and burnt down the White House. And the guys that went down there were getting, the closer they got to the White House, the more nervous they were getting, because they thought, we have an obligation to, basically eye for an eye kind of thing, to get back at these guys. But they were getting very nervous the closer they got to the White House because they were expecting a massive resistance. And when they got to the White House, everybody run away. And so I use the same. You don't stop at the gate. You go in. 10,000 people can take back America. Okay, you go and you go to the gates. You walk in. You arrest those inside. You make sure that you have people who are capable, good talking heads, and good technical people. It wouldn't take more than 50 people to take over any of the major broadcasting corporate offices in the country, right? And it would be a very quiet affair, because it's simply we interrupt this broadcast to alert the people of America that America is back in American hands. It is now back to government by and for the people. Thank you for listening. We now return to regular broadcasting. There will not be an uprising.
No.
Okay? The people will go back to watching the regular show and go, what the hell was that? I don't know. Maybe they took over the White House. Oh, that's cool. Just pass me a beer, will you? This is the reaction that you would get, and then you can rebuild your country from there. But Alex Jones, he's going, well, that won't work. I go, why is that, Alex? And he goes, well, if we did that, they wouldn't broadcast it, he says, and then they would set off truck bombs and stuff and blame us. I go, what the hell is that supposed to be? So he had this retired general on his show, and he says, General, I got this Canuck over here saying we just walk in and take the place over. And I tell him it won't work. And the general is going, well, yeah, it won't work. And Alex says, why? I told him it would. Yeah, why won't it work? He says, well, if we did that, when we got to the White House, there'd be nobody there to arrest. They would have all run away. Uh-huh. This is how weak these people are.
Yeah.
And when you said, Michael, when the miners and the Politico was feeling pretty good, because we've seen lots of protests before, but when that one gentleman put his fist down or whatever, and they saw that he had got a rise out of the other miners, their faces went white. They went, oh shit, right? Because they knew at that minute it was over.
Yeah.
And they want to get out of there quick.
Yeah, all they're thinking about is their own skins. And we're
right.
talking about Europe before. You got 540 million people who live in Europe, European Union, I should say, which is only a small part of Europe. But the people who are effectively running, we're not talking about the talking heads, the suits. We're talking about the people who are actually governing these 540 million people. You could put them all on a single-deck bus. That's how small they are, and we don't realize just how powerful we are.
Well, the only power they have, Michael, is the power we allow them to have.
Yes.
If we allow them no power, they have no power. It's that simple.
That's right. Yeah.
So I look at this as I say a lot that the Third World War started actually pre-World War I, but we had to get through the first two, and World War III is not so much a shoot 'em up war. It's a psychological and spiritual war. Uh-huh. And we have to understand that. Once we understand that, it's a very simple war to win.
Sure.
We're not facing tanks.
We've got to give people confidence. People have got to have confidence that they can do it and they will do it. And one of the best things, we were talking about Renegade Tribune before, which I contributed and a major contributor to it. And one of the best articles was the one in which we mentioned earlier on, in which 9 countries in Europe, there'd been a dramatic swing to the radical right. And, people were saying, this is the good news. We don't want to hear all the bad news about the Jews running America and, the economy in a mess, all the rest of it. We don't want to hear this. We want to hear the good news. So we must adopt the Napoleonic adage, Ron, and the best way to defeat your enemy is to convince him that he can't win. And we've got to put some backbone into our own people, and we've got to make the people that you and I are talking about look at the quick exit door.
Yeah, we have to make them nervous.
Absolutely, and I think we are making them nervous.
And I don't know how it is in your neck of the. I'm really enjoying this. I thank you for doing this show. I really truly do. The insights is what's necessary.
Yep.
This regionalization, globalization, UN agendas, and all this stuff, it's all being implemented at your local municipal hall, right?
Sure.
Your local town hall. And people say, well, what are we supposed to do about it, right? Like we have the Rothschilds and all of these people that are controlling. No. You can only affect change where your feet are. Okay, so don't worry about who the president is. Don't worry about who's pulling the puppet strings. It doesn't matter. You can't get at them. Okay, but you can affect change where your feet are, and that's the only place you can really affect change.
Yeah.
And where your feet are is in a local community somewhere, which has a town hall, which has a local council.
Sure.
Who the puppet masters are sending down the templates for them to implement.
Uh-huh.
And then who do you need to make nervous? You need to make nervous those in your local council. Okay, now most of those have been vetted. Most of them came out of universities. Most of them have not much intellect, really. They think they're intellectuals, but they're not. They're programmed, and they're following the program. So our job is to get them proper information, to try to shake loose the propaganda that they've accepted as reality, and bring them back to a position of reality. And if they refuse to do so, then we need to get in their faces and call them out. We had one lady that was called me from Calgary that was listening to a show, and they were fighting about fluoride out in Calgary. And they went to the council meetings, went to council meetings, and nothing was happening, right? Because it's a closed position, because most of the public doesn't watch a council meeting and go to a council meeting. So these people said, fine, you sons of bitches. And they went out and made posters of each of the people in the council and put their home phone numbers on it and simply made statements, call this person is poisoning your child, and ask them why that is. And that worked really well. And the council went, uh-oh, it's the same as a coal miner, when those bureaucrats' faces went white, right? And nobody was shooting anybody. It was just that we're telling you this is what you're going to do, and if you don't do it, all hell is going to break loose for your personal life. Your comfort zone is about to be taken away from you.
Yep.
And they almost immediately pulled fluoride out of the water in Calgary. And that's the power of the people.
They can do it when they get the confidence. We've got to give them the confidence to do it. We've got to show them that we've got to give them the tools to do it. And the best tool of all is the confidence of knowing that they can do it.
Yeah, and I think that's I honestly, truly think that's our role, or one of them, is to try to build confidence in the people.
Yeah, this is what I'm doing. I'm trying to discipline myself, Ron, with the thought that, yes, the news has got to be reported, and the news isn't always what we want it to be. We have to, if we're going to be honest, then we have to show both sides of the coin, but we're not being positive enough. We're too negative. And every time I switch on in the morning, I get a lot of emails, and they're saying about how bad things are. And I want to just hear a little bit of how good things are. Here's some good news from Denmark. Here's some good news from Canada. Wow, have you heard this great news from the United States? This is what we want to hear more of.
Yeah, that's the change we made, because the negative is I just call that the fear porn, right? If everybody that's running around out there on the internet are saying, "Oh my God, look what they've done here, look what they've done there," right? Go find a little story like the one in Calgary where the people said, "You know what?
Yep.
Watch this." Okay? Those are the kind of stories that we need more of. Not the, they didn't listen to us and they kicked us out, or they came and arrested us and no, you shouldn't, and then the people go, "I can't stand up, sorry," right? Because I don't want to get in trouble. And I tell people, what do you mean get in trouble? You are in trouble, right? Okay, you are in trouble. So the point now is, how do we fix the problem? And that's to be positive, to get a strong spine and get a strong mind. And it's not about going and and hanging and shooting and quartering and all this kind of nonsense. It's simply about putting your foot down, right?
Yeah.
And saying enough is enough. We're on to what you're up to, okay? And we're not going to put up with it, okay? And once you start, I suppose the most, if they won't back down, then you just, put a claimant against and drag their sorry asses into a courtroom. Now, the courtroom's not going to do much, but it will scare the snot out of them because you put the fear of them losing something. You put the fear of them being outed. And I don't know how it is in Europe again, Michael, but I'm starting to see now where some of these bureaucrats and some of these people are getting nervous, and it looks like we've almost moved into the position now of where those who thought they were powerful, be it the local policeman or local legislature, are starting to look around and are beginning to throw each other under the bus.
Yes,
to save their own skin. And I don't know if that's going on in Europe or not, but I hope so.
It is going on in Europe. People are waking up. They're waking up fast. And we were talking about before, Ron, is don't take any notice of the media. There was an occasion here not so long ago when there was 50 major marches through European cities against the regimes that are running them. And I'll guarantee you that you didn't hear one single word about that in the American or the Canadian press. These are big, big stories. Now, to give you an example about, focus here, is when you get those punk rockers, I can't remember the names of them. There was 4 or 5 girls, and they allegedly had been some part of a pop group that nobody had ever heard of. But they were totally elevated well beyond their worth by the Western media because these 5 girls had come out, bared their breasts, and chanted. They'd gone into Moscow's most sacred Orthodox church. They jumped up on the altar and they'd screamed every kind of profanity alone. And these girls are what the press in the mainstream media called heroines, who were against Putin. And they were pulling down crucifixes. They were the most offensive garbage you've ever come across. Now, these 5 or 6 girls, when they took off their tops and demonstrated in Moscow, that was headline news throughout the world. But when 1 million people march in London or Madrid or Berlin, anywhere in any of the major cities, it doesn't make a peep in the mainstream media. So that's what I say. Mainstream media, dump it, go to alternative media, have a look at both sides of the story. Don't just read the Washington Post. Go to the other side, have a look at Sputnik International or Russia Today, and then you make up your mind. That's what I call democracy.
That's exactly correct, because you're going to find no media can get away with 100% bullcrap all the time, right?
Nope.
And they're all, I don't care what it is, there is all some kind of a ulterior motive or control factor. And you have to become very astute on how you read something. And that's the thing that we try to teach people too, is take a mainstream news story and basically go through it. And encourage people, if you're reading anything, I don't care if it's mainstream or it's online or where it is, that, you'll see things like somebody suggests, scientists suggest, or this expert says, right? Well, you need to go track that expert back and see who that expert's attached to, right? Just because it says this expert says, and then people say, oh, an expert said it, so I guess I can believe it. No, you can't. You must go and track that person down. And once you start doing that,
it's fun.
There you go. It's fun. It is absolutely
fun. I can recommend
fun.
Political Life to anybody.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's great to be a detective.
Wonderful fun. And
I remember years ago, if I can interject here, Ron, is that the Simon Wiesenthal Centre, which I think is based in, despite the fact that he's dead, it keeps on going, of course, and recycling the same old garbage. And they were making the headlines with 90-something people had died during the Crystal Night riots in Berlin in 1934 or whenever it was. And I wrote to him and said, name me one. I'm still waiting.
Yeah.
But of course, the press kept on saying about 93 people had died during the anti-Jewish pogroms in Kristallnacht, not saying, of course, why they happened. But I said, name me one, and he couldn't name me one. But, this is not the purpose of the press. The press is not there to be objective. It's there to mould people's opinions. And I think they're losing that stranglehold, Ron.
I really too. I do too. It's been a long, long time coming. I mean, George, George Hunt. I don't know if you know him or not, but he's an American guy out of Colorado, and he first got caught onto this Wildlands project, the UN agenda, which is basically to take all the world resources, which is what the EU is really doing. I mean, the EU program there is to soften those people up and to say, we'll redistribute so that everyone has an adequate lifestyle stuff right out of the UN Human Rights Code. And George, just happened to be at a meeting. He wasn't interested in it. He said he was looking for a job for his kid. And, Evelyn de Rothschild was there and Morris Strong and Rockefeller, and he couldn't figure out why they were there. Most people, and this is the difference in how people think, most people would go be impressed, right? Well, look at all these important people. George, on the hand, went, what the hell are they doing here, right? Which put him into an investigative position, which basically destroyed his life because he went to that meeting in '87. Before that, he'd been in the forces in America, and he was a businessman, and he was doing everything that he thought was supposed to be because that's the way he was mentally trained. And then this thing happened, which caused him to look at things a little differently. And but George, last time I interviewed him, he was starting to get quite a bit weaker in that. And he was pretty well down in the mouth. He'd worked from '87 onward, trying to alert people to what was going on, and as he said, trying to strike a few sparks. And from those sparks, maybe we could fan a flame, and we could put a stop to this nonsense. And he wasn't talking about violent revolution. We just need people to be aware and stand up and say no, basically. And he was getting pretty tired, and he's passed on since. But the last show I did with him, he said, Ron, he says, I don't think we can stop them now. He said they're so far ahead of us now, and he was sounding pretty tired, and I said, George,
defeatist.
All those sparks you were hoping would happen because of all the talks and that you gave and whatnot. He goes, yeah. I said, they're happening. They're finally happening.
Mm-hmm.
And we will beat these clowns, right? There's no ifs, ands, or buts in my mind. If I didn't think I could beat them, or we could beat them, I wouldn't be doing these shows.
That's right.
And by the end of the show, he said, you know what, Ron? We will beat them. We can beat them. And I think he died about 6 months after that, and I missed the guy. But this is the dedication that a lot of people over the years who few people really know about have dedicated themselves to exactly what George was doing, and that's trying to alert the people to try to strengthen their minds and their spines so that they will stand up. And, I think we're finally getting there. I really feel it.
Well, I've been involved, as you said earlier, I've been involved since 1968. I first went to the barricades. And, I've been through pretty depressing times. I became a member of the British movement at a time when there were relatively few coloureds in Britain. And you could go into London and you wouldn't see that many coloureds. Now it's very, very difficult to go into London and not see, and to see a white person. So you can imagine the change that I have had. That was pre-internet. We were working on printing machines. So your world, or the younger people's world, I have gone really basically from the 17th century to the 21st century in 50 years.
Yeah.
And I have seen remarkable change and I'm more optimistic now than I've ever been. And there were times in my life when I fought only because I thought it was the right thing to do, not necessarily because I thought that we would win. But there was never many times in my life when I really genuinely thought that we would win. But I've come to a stage now in my life where even at my age, I think we're going to do this, and we're going to do it before I pop my clogs, before I fall off the perch. We're going to see it, and that will be wonderful for me, because I was born during the World War II, which was the greatest calamity that ever affected Europe. 70 to 100 million people died thanks to American-made Bolshevism. And, the Bolshevism has collapsed. The British Empire that I was born into, that's collapsed. That is history. America, I'm sorry to say this to my American listeners, but America, we all know it, is on the point of collapse. Where is the New World heading? And we're going to be a vital part of it.
Yeah, I love the quote. I just absolutely, I love the scene in 1984, and I thought it was a fictional book until I forget the writer's real name, but till I went in and investigated that and found out that his father was a high-level bureaucrat in Britain, and I said, "Oh, okay, this isn't a fiction." Okay, now I get it. But the scene, up above the antique shop or wherever Winston and his girlfriend used to meet, and she says, like, "Let's just get out of here." And he goes where? And she goes, "Anywhere." He said, "But everywhere is the same as here."
Exactly.
And that's where we can't allow this to get to. I've said for as long as I can remember, there's only two things holding up the final empire, is what I'm calling it, is the American Constitution. Regardless if American Constitution was a fraud in the first place, sure. Regardless of that idea, that the American Constitution and the King James Bible are the only two things that are holding these guys back. And they have to destroy those two things, because the new world they want is earth worship, and therefore that Bible has to disappear, and the American Constitution has to disappear. And the American Constitution has been all but shredded. I mean, George Bush called it just a damn piece of paper, and you have a non-American president for 2 terms. What's it take, people? What does it take? You have the schools now teaching the kids Sharia and to pray to Allah. Your society is a Christian, supposedly free nation. Everything that's going on around you is the opposite now. At some point, you're going to have to stand up and say no, and mean it. This idea of heroes, okay, has got to be put to rest as well. The last election, it was all about Ron Paul. Well, Ron Paul's been in this political business for most of his life, therefore he's a player. But instead of the people saying, "This is our land, we will defend our land," no, we'll put all our money on one card, our hero. Okay?
Yeah, sure.
And heroes is what brings down nations. Okay, putting all your money on one card, you're all in. What happens if your hero doesn't win?
That's right. You've got to have a massive civil disobedience, as somebody said before, is when you license something, this means that the government is taking it from you, they're giving it back to you, and they're charging you for it. And
I love that.
Yeah, this basically sums up the government, and, it's got to be stopped, and it's got to be stopped by people power, and that is civil disobedience, and we all go and pay our taxes, and we do this disobediently. What happens when you get to a stage where people say, "I'm not paying any taxes"? Now, how many jails have they got? How many? They just can't.
That's
now,
it.
If you and I say we're not going to pay any taxes, they will just come along and arrest us. But when 1,000 people come along and say, "I'm not paying my taxes," they got a problem. And it's a bit like that old joke, when you owe the bank $50,000, you've got a problem. When you owe them $50 million, they've got a problem. And it's exactly the same way.
Exactly. The banks are too big to fail, therefore you have to pay for the bank's mistake.
Yeah, it's a load of rubbish, but I've used this analogy in Europe because, Europe is suffering terribly from this so-called refugee influx. It's not a refugee influx, it's an invasion, which is, being created to destroy Europe. But as I say, this proves the point. When you and I walk up to a border point and your paperwork isn't correct and my paperwork isn't correct, we just don't go past that frontier. End of story.
Well,
but when there's 100,000 Ron Stevens or even 10,000 Ron Stevens and Michael Walshes, what are they going to do? There's nothing they can do about it, and this proves it.
And what people have to understand is I think people sell themselves short.
You do.
Okay, I've got 1 year of grade 11. Okay, I'm self-educated. I'm a person that came out of my mother asking questions, and I'm still going to die asking questions, because only by asking a question can you find an answer.
Yep.
That's the only way, and each time you find an answer, you will find it leads you to a new question, which requires an answer, and that becomes fun. People are selling themselves short. When I try to get people to run, it's okay. The problem is down here at the local level. So we have, say, 7 counselors or 6 counselors and a mayor. So we got to get rid of 7 of these people. We have to get majority. So, having been in marketing and understand marketing and pretty good with numbers, I said, okay, if they have 7, which are already vetted, and they're all saying the same message, then we need to run 3 to 1. So we need to run 21 candidates. That's it. If we run 21 candidates, we only need to get 4 of the positions, which gives us the majority vote, which is pretty bloody simple. If you're running 21 against 7, you should get all of the votes. But regardless, you should have majority at the end of this thing.
Yeah.
Now, that's pretty simple stuff. Put in your $100. Let's go. Oh, I couldn't do something like that. I don't think I'm qualified to do something like that. Would I be qualified to do something like that? Oh, I'm nervous. I can't do things like that. I spent 2 years trying to get people to run in local elections. I heard every excuse in the book. I got to the point where I'm saying, fine, suck air, go be under the United Nations world government, where they're going to cut your water usage by 75%, and you won't be able to pay a hydro bill and all the rest of this nonsense. Fill your boots. I was getting right frustrated.
People are very complacent.
But I had an old, I can't remember, she was Czechoslovakian or Yugoslavian woman who had migrated here, and they built a house here, bought a house, only to be surrounded by windmills, and they couldn't live there. It was driving them nuts, so they moved, and I just happened to be at a meeting where they were, and I was pulling my hair out. I mean, I get how I understand what controlled opposition is. I've been around it too long. I get it, and they were trying to move me off to the side, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of frustration. I went through a lot of frustration for many years. And this Yugoslavian or Czechoslovakian woman said to me, and her accent, Ron. I go, what? She goes, don't worry about these people. I go, what? She said, you're so far ahead of them, they don't know what you're talking about.
You are. Mm-hmm.
Okay? They're going to have to catch up. She says, leave them be. You keep doing what you're doing. You stay. Keep moving. Keep researching, right? Okay? They will eventually get it. But don't waste your time down in here now, right? So, that's been that's about, I don't know, 7 years ago now or so. And I see people now starting to be pushed hard enough against the wall, have their pockets picked hard enough now that they are beginning to ask questions. And it is only, you can't, like it's the old story, you can lead a horse to water, right?
Yep.
But you can't make him drink. And I've had a lot of really good friends who've been really good researchers, and they're people I met through research who got to the point where they just said, I've had it. I can't deal with this anymore. These people are stupid. They deserve what they get. I'm just throwing up my hands and screw them all. And now I'm trying to encourage people to wake up, and I'm trying to encourage those really good researchers not to just back out of this, because we're almost there, okay? The people that you believed were just plain stupid, and you couldn't get to any of these people know how. These people are now being pushed to the point where they are looking to talk to you. So
Yeah,
information. So.
Yeah, I agree. What you have, and I remember this saying, and it motivates me a great deal. Apparently, in 1920s Germany was in a terrible state. You just think of a country, but it was far, far worse than downtown Montreal or Quebec. It was bad. It was bad. And there was a lot of degeneracy, poverty. There were kids on the street selling their bodies. It was one of the poorest nations in Europe, Germany, in the 1920s. And, they didn't hold, when Hitler and his few of his associates were driving through whatever city it was, probably Munich at the time, one of his aides turned to him and he said, look at these people on the side street, on the sidewalks, He said, really, are they worth fighting for? And Hitler turned to him and he said, I'm not fighting for what they are, I am fighting for what they could be. Well,
right.
A few years later, he was in power, and 36 months later, Germany was the most powerful country in Europe, and its living standards then were far superior to anything that we know of now. So if you take your average middle-class family in the United States and Canada, don't count on your good luck, because an ordinary German postman or postwoman had a far better lifestyle than you do in 1930s. But they don't tell you this. And I've just published my book on Amazon, Right and Wrong. It is an illustrated, so photographs, there they are, you can't dispute them, of the four societies in the 1930s. You've got the Reich, which was extremely prosperous, great film stars, would make middle-class America look poverty-stricken by comparison. Then you had Bolshevik-occupied Russia. It wasn't a Russian Revolution at all. It was Bolshevik-occupied Russia. You have never seen such poverty in your life. You needed a coupon just for a small piece of bread. And then the picture turns to the United States. You had the Dust Bowl. You had the Great Depression. 7 million Americans died as a direct or related, to hunger and lack of jobs. It was the only time in history where the American population had actually declined. And then you move on to Britain, and the pictures there of Britain in the 1930s would make anybody of the most stony heart break down and weep. So out of those four countries, Germany, Hitler's Germany, I should say, United States, Bolshevik-occupied Russia, and Britain, there was only one great, prosperous country. And I've said that Adolf Hitler's Workers' Reich, it lasted for 13 and a half years. How come they only tell us about the 4.5 years that it was at war, a war that was foisted upon them? Why don't we hear about the 7.5 years that it was at peace? What was it like in Germany in 1934, 1936, 1938? Tell us about it. You can't find it because they don't want you to see the pictures.
Well,
Sorry,
Hitler was Man of the Year on Time magazine, I think in 36, maybe.
He still is, believe it or not. Mein Kampf is the second biggest selling book to the
Bible. Yeah,
that's a fact.
Yeah, and I'm still working my way through that stuff as far as who was behind Hitler? Was that all puppet land as well? I mean, when I go back and look at, we have the money people, right? They constructed the depressions in order to get people that were poor enough that they would go to war for a paycheck. So, but the fact is that Germany did come out of the ashes and did get brought the people from hopelessness basically
Yep.
into a very strong willed society who had pride in themselves. They weren't a beaten people anymore. And what I see in most of the countries today, it's because of the psychological spiritual war, and as I see beaten people, I talk to people all the time. Where's the happy kids? Where are the happy kids? And you can go take that back to pre-Hitler days, right? When you talk about the kids being on the streets and that, and got hungry bellies and whatnot, which we have here in Canada now, for God's sakes. Hitler. And I'm not pro anything really. I mean, this is just what some history is that those kids had full bellies and good clothes and were not. They went from beaten to standing on their own 2 feet. And what I see, here is, I asked a kid one time. I said, "How come I don't see you guys roughhousing or nothing?" Right?
Yeah.
You don't look happy. Well, he said, roughhousing. What do you mean? I said, you guys aren't, shoving each other around and laughing and carrying on and whatnot, right? Well, we're not allowed. And I go, what do you mean you're not allowed? These are 14-year-old grade 9 kids, boys. I said, well, what do you mean you're not allowed? Well, our teachers told us if we get caught, even not on the school grounds, if a teacher sees us roughhousing somewhere after schools, even on the weekend, that they will mark us, and that it could have a negative impact on our future career choices.
This is Sovietism, isn't it? This is like the Soviet Union.
Exactly. And if you go back to the Reese Commission with Norman Dodd, that's exactly what they said when they were commissioned to go find out what these tax-exempt foundations were up to. And Dodd was talking to one of the Ford boys, and the Ford guy's going, "What is it you're doing?" "Well, we're trying to find out what you're doing." And he said, "Well, that's simple. Our job is to Sovietize the West, or Sovietize America, to be exact." And that's exactly what's going on, and that has to be stopped.
It's total control. It's total control. It's control over our lives. We've become battery hens. We're no different from any creatures in a factory farm. Is everything, and I mean absolutely everything that we do. And so why are we doing it? Because we accept it. Here in Spain, you've got a very bureaucratic country, and for something that is very, very simple, like when I wanted to marry my wife, and she wanted to marry me. Now, there's really no reason why we can't just walk into a post office. She shows her past divorce documents, her birth, the evidence that she is who she is, and we part with €10 in our case, and then we're married. Why can't that happen, Ron? But no, it cost us over €1,000 in bureaucracy.
Well,
so that was the government. That was the government that was trousering our money for something just because we wanted to be together. If we didn't want to be together, then we were going to pay a price in taxes and all the rest of it. So they really got us screwed.
Well, that goes back to your licensing thing that we were talking about, right?
Yeah.
Licensing is theft.
It's just theft.
That's all it is. It's theft. It's theft and control, right?
Yep.
But when I tell the kids, when I was in grade 9, we had a gun range in our school. Okay, I just got somebody was at my blog. The phone's going off.
Okay,
somebody was at my blog. I was supposed to call them back. That's fine. But we had a gun range in our school. We were encouraged to be a good shot. None of the guns were locked up. None of the ammunition was locked up.
No.
And now in 2016, the kids at our high school here cannot play baseball because the bat has been designated a weapon.
Oh, dear goodness.
Okay, that's how far we've come the wrong way. We have.
How's it going to be defended with the people who are brought up in such a system? It can't be, can it? It can't be. It's going to be
This is the whole
it's going to be a
idea.
walkover. A Russian battalion will just walk all over the United States, won't it? Let's face it. This is the reality.
Well, there's a movie, and it's I don't know if you're aware of it. I keep pushing it at American people and Canadian people and Australian people, and anybody else that will listen to it. But Our Common Future, Girl Brundtland, which was actually written by Jim McNeil, a Canadian, and Morris Strong and Rockefeller. Our Common Future, Sustainable Development, nonsense. They just put her name on it, and I guess she was head of the commission or whatever. But the same year in 1987 that Our Common Future came out, there was a movie, a 13-part series on American television called America, but with a K. And it is the story that we are living right now. It's the feminization of the boys. It's the Russian takeover. The bureaucratic takeover. It's the American
the gay agenda, family control, the whole thing.
Right.
Race mixing. It is all genocide under several different hats.
Absolutely, and people need to get that, right. Like Toronto, Ontario, which we used to go to when I was a teenager, and it was basically, pretty much white. I think there's 128 different languages or more spoke there now. It's like you said about Britain. Where'd the white guy go? And they sell it as multiculturalism. And, it's not. The migration of the Islam is a very, very dangerous thing, because what they did to us in the West, in order to enslave us in their legal system, is they separated church and state. They separated law from us, okay?
Yep.
And they give us the legal system, which is a corporate system, okay?
Absolutely.
So the law has been taken from us, and what makes Islam so dangerous, and the fact that they wish to destroy Christianity, is that Islam is not church and state separated. Okay, it never got separated. That's why you have these no-go zones coming on, saying, our state and our religion are one.
Sure.
Okay? You cannot supersede that with your legal system. And that's what's going on. And we have this, they say, how come they're letting them have Sharia law?
Sure.
Well, it's all part of the plan.
Exactly.
It's called genocide. But I did have a meeting. I mean, I live in a town of 7,000 people, a municipality of 12,000 people. And, our local papers pushing Islam. Our local churches are sponsoring Islam, right? You go, wait a minute here. So they had a youth Islam meeting here, and I went to it, and I was the only one that showed up, which was fine with me, because then I had a chance to talk to these people. And we had a really good chat. We talked for about 2 hours, and I said, all the propaganda boards you have here, I could. This is all New World shit. I could put on water, save water, don't use coal. I mean, it's the same. It's the same template. They just plug in whatever the subject is they wish to propagate at the time. And I said, they have convinced you that the Quran is going to be the global Bible, and they said absolutely, and that Islam will be the religion, absolutely, and that Sharia will be the law, absolutely. It will be, because they told us, no, you silly farts, you are being used as useful idiots. Okay, your job is to come in here and destroy the Christian faith and the so-called law that we think we have, which in fact it isn't law, but that we've still hang on to this idea. But you have to understand, you're just another useful idiot. And when you will have accomplished what they wish you to accomplish, you will be eradicated like a bug. Because the law is global law. It is not Sharia law. It is corporate law. And the religion is pagan earth worship, not Islam. So you will be dispensed with when you have done your job. Period. And, so we have a lot of work to do, but the people have to understand that if Christianity falls, it's over.
Yeah.
Okay, it's that
It's over
simple.
for us. What people don't realise, because many of them are fortunate enough to be surrounded by white people, and they see white people every time. The media, they push race mixing down our throats. But very often, and we see examples of this, at Fox News or CNN or something like that, they got about 200 or 300 staff members, and none of them are coloured. They're all white.
Yeah.
And so we become inured to it, and we start believing that we are, a majority of numbers. The people who can describe themselves as ethnic European now only make 8% of the people on the face of the earth. And they are being overrun. And, we are, I would say that anybody under 30 now, anybody under 40, you're going to end up as reservation Indians exactly the same way. You're going to go the same way as the Incas and the Aztecs in Central and South America. You're going to go the same way as the Maoris and the Aborigines in Australia and New Zealand and the Native Americans in the reservations. You will be totally surrounded, and it will be them that will call the shots. It's too late then.
That's fantastic, because I was talking to a Native woman at a reserve one time, and I asked her, I said, do you understand the plan for Whitey? Okay, meaning everyone who is not Native, okay?
Sure.
And she just looked at me so quiet and calm, and she just shook her head, yes. And I said, how come is it that everything I'm trying to tell Whitey is just bouncing off their head?
Yep.
And you get it so easily. And I want everybody to hear this. She just looked at me and said, we lived through it. Now it's your turn. Okay? And the UN agenda is just that, is to move you off the land and into reserves. Okay, and just like the reserves, and all you have to do is look at a reserve. Their water sucks, their education sucks, and they are tied down in there, and they're completely dependent upon this structure, which is there to abuse them.
Yep. We're already there. I went to jail for 4 months in 1979. I had 6 sentences of 4 months. One of them was just for publishing a sticker which says, it showed a little graphic of a coloured man embracing a white woman, and the wording was, race mixing destroys our people. Now, the Jews know that, the Africans know that, the Indians know that, the Japanese and the Chinese know it, but I went to jail for 4 months for publishing a leaflet. I also went to jail for 4 months for publishing a leaflet that had said that if immigration continues at its present level, the time will come when London and our other major cities, there will be large areas of it in which whites can't go. I got 4 months for that, and yet that is exactly what has happened. There are large parts of Leicester, Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool, London, of course, where you cannot go if you're white because you are just going to run through a gauntlet.
Yeah, and that is the genocide of your nation, people, and it doesn't get better, and it's not by accident. Okay, no. It is most definitely not by accident. It is well planned out, and the propaganda is coming at you from every direction. We had, before they brought in this thing, we actually have an Islamic center in our little town now, which is a Scottish town, mostly Scottish. It is 99.9999% white. And all of a sudden we have an Islamic center. What the hell is that all about? Okay, that's the foot in the door, right? And should I say anything bad about Islam, even though there's only a few so-called Muslims here, and I will be trounced. I may get thrown in jail.
They get a soft. I wrote this in the Daily Mail before, and everybody agreed with me. Is the difference between the left wing and the right wing? Is the left wing, they are treated with kid gloves by the authorities, by the police, by the judicial system. So when they break the law, they get out of jail free. But when you and I break the law, as they say it, and they make the laws, when I publish a leaflet that says the obvious that anybody knows is right, race mixing destroys our people, which of course it does. 2 and 2 is 4. You can't change that. I get 4 months. So in Germany and in Britain today, if you are a revolutionary firebrand communism, you can more or less get away with anything. But if you publish anything, and this includes Facebook, if you publish anything which is pro-white, then of course you will be blocked or jailed. So the entire system is weighted against the white people. And as I say, we're only 8% now, Ron. And, if we don't react soon, then there isn't going to be enough of us to react. We're gone. We're in reservations.
Yeah, we have, I can't remember her name now. I had it earlier, but that Swedish singer that I saw quite a few years ago, and I don't know if that's the proper way to go about it. Like, because they're nationalists, okay, they all get labeled skinheads and Hitler people and all this kind of stuff. But all they're trying to do is explain to the people that this is our nation, okay, and they're taking us down. She's a singer there, and she's getting, like, what the hell do we got to do to wake these people up, right? We had a comedian came here, Russell Peters, from, I don't know, he came from India or wherever, but, he'd stand on the stage and he would say, and his jokes were quite demeaning about his white friends, but he would say, the plan is that everybody is going to be beige when we're done, okay? We're going to take your women, okay? And the audience is laughing their asses off thinking this guy's being a comedian. He's telling them exactly what they're up to, what the plan is, and these poor people that go to the theater who think they're there to be entertained are being told exactly what the plan is, just like Rockefeller and all the other guys write everything down, telling you to your face what's going on. I mean, these people they're bringing into your countries have a birth rate of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 killed. They've got ours down through propaganda of Planned Parenthood and all this nonsense down to basically only or less than replacement value of our race. How long are we going to survive like this?
We're not going to, and we just got to get together. And as I point out, I'm not being critical of the Jews. There are 14.7 million of them. There are cities with more than 14 million people. Singapore, Hong Kong, New York. These cities have got more than 4 million. That is 14 million. That is the entire population of Jews. So you tell me how that 14 million are controlling 1 billion Europeans, ethnic Europeans. How is it that they're controlling them?
Because
it really is a case of a very small dog, a very small tail wagging a very big dog.
Yeah, I mean, they tried, though. They took them 2 world wars to create the world body, be it the League of Nations or the United Nations, and World War I. People don't seem to understand this. World War I, it was a mission to create League of Nations, world body, and a state of Israel. It was offered to them in North Africa or somewhere, and they didn't like the location, so it failed.
Madagascar.
Was it? So it failed.
The original idea was that they would go to Madagascar, and the French were quite happy with it. I think it was a German colony at one time. Tanganyika was a German colony. It was taken off them in 1919. And the arrangement was, with the Jews working in favour of it, was that the Jews of Germany, of which there were too many, I think about 500,000 had fled into Nazi Germany to escape the pogroms in Poland in 1936. The Germans, the National Socialists, had the same problem as we've got problem now. But in those days, instead of Syrian refugees, there were Jewish refugees. And the problem for the Third Reich is, what are we going to do with them? So they got together with the Zionist authorities and said, well, we're going to go to Madagascar. And why didn't they go to Madagascar? It's a beautiful climate and a beautiful part of the world. And why did they go to Palestine and take it off people who were already there?
Well, it's the homeland, right? Anyways, Michael, we are right now, I think, about a half a minute from, or less, from being out of time. I want to really thank you. I enjoyed the hell out of this today. I truly did. And I appreciate you being on. I appreciate Chris very much for hooking us up. And I'm hoping we can do this again sometime. Go to Renegade Tribune. Michael is a writer there. Do you have a website or a blog or anything?
I have a website, but it's a very difficult one for me to recount over the. So they wouldn't be able to write it down fast enough. But if they do go to Renegade Tribune, everything is on there.
Okay.
Books, me, absolutely everything.
Okay. I hear music. That was a quick 2 hours. I thank you, brother, and hopefully someday I can sit down in a pub in Spain with you and have a drink. Anyways, take care, everybody. Time's up, and we will see you, I guess, Tuesday night at 7 o'clock here at UC5 Yellow. Okay, take care, everybody. We are over.